Hi there, it's Lindsay Upton the Quilt Quine, and I'm going to go over how to do the Goosey Guddle block, which is a remake of a really cute 1930s block. So let's see what we've got down on the cutting table. So I've already cut out all of the pieces, as you can see. There are 2 squares cut diagonally. They're going to be the outer triangles. I've got 1 square which was 9.5 inches cut into 4 diagonals. 1 other square at 5.5 inches cut into 4 diagonals. 4 2.5-inch squares, 2 are patterned, 2 are plain. These are going to make up the geese. There are 8 rectangles at 3.5 by 6 and 16 squares at 3.5 inches square each. And I've already drawn a pen line on the back of all of those. So we're ready to go. Okay, so here's where I usually start. We've got the 4 little squares in the middle and they're all going to have triangles attached to them. First thing I'm going to just do is fold all of these triangles so that they have a really nice, neat little crease. So I just finger press them so I can see. And then I'll take it over to the sewing machine. So that little fold is going to line up on my seam line. One thing I will say is I've got a vintage travel iron and a felt pad here. You either need to consistently iron between actions or finger press. Try not to mix and match. I have found to my cost that it doesn't always work out that way. Right, I'm going to grab all these pieces, take them over to the machine and assemble them. So I've got the patterned piece right side up and then I've got a plain piece going on top of it. Obviously, because it's a plain piece, it doesn't really matter which way up it is, but it would be the right sides together. So I've got it under my patchwork foot. I like to use this pokey little tailor's awl just to steer things. I've got it on stitch length 2 with a size 75 needle and 50 weight Orifil cotton thread. I like to start on a little scrap of fabric so that there's no tails hanging around. Go right down the edge of that. Then I grab the next 2. I think that was a bit wonky, but we won't tell a quilt police, will we? Right, then we're going to go down there. Now you could merrily chain piece a whole load of blocks at once, but I'm just doing 1 block at the moment. I'm going to go off onto my scrap, get my scissors to snip them apart like this. Whoops, try to keep it in shot, otherwise you won't see what I'm doing. Now finger pressing is all I need to do at the moment, so I'm going to open them out and I'm going to press my fingers along the stitch line so that that's going that way. Then I'll get the other one so that they're opposite each other and I'm going to get that seam line to come that way, so they're going in opposite directions. Just press it into place, it should be fine. Right sides together, patterned on top of plain. Here we go. And I'm not using any pins, so I shall just have a little look underneath to see that the seams are going to just nestle up together. It's called butting up together, okay? There we go. Not too fast. Right off the edge onto another scrappy bit of fabric, just to make sure I can not have any loose thread tails flapping. Snip them off, and then I'm going to open out this piece and just finger press it into shape. I could iron it at this point, but there's nothing bias or too stretchy about it at the moment, so it's all going to be fine. So it's flattish. Now remember when we did a little fold in the triangles, a little crease appeared. That little crease is going to line up exactly with the seam line. just about there. The triangle tails are hanging off the edges, and that's fine. So slow start, and it definitely helps that I've got in a straight stitch plate. Here's me coming up to the join. Slow at the end, and I'm just using my tailor's awl to just make sure that I stay straight. Just go onto the scrappy bit, like that. I hope you can see what's going on. I'm just going to push that triangle out the way, finger press it down, and then I'm going to sew a triangle onto the opposite side to that. So here we go again. I can just see the little fold mark that I made. So I line that up over the seam and slowly go over here, keeping the edge of my foot with the edge of the block right off the edge like that, onto the scrap, snip it free from both ends. Okay, push that triangle out of the way, and now it's got a triangle on two sides. I'm going to grab a third triangle, line up the little fold crease that I made with the seam line. So you can still see the ears of the triangles poking off the side. And I have to move my little other camera over because it's tripping me up. Okay, here we go. Slowly down the edge. Hope my hand's not blocking the view. See, I don't have any long strings of thread coming out. I'll just crease that over to one side. So now I've got 3 triangles on 3 sides of the square, and the fourth one again, right sides together. The crease that I made in the triangle is on the seam of the 4 patch. Slow start, trying to keep it all flat and level. Okay, off onto the scrap part, snip it free, and now I am going to go and take it over and give it a little press with the iron. Right, I'm going to take my little trusty travel iron to give it all a bit of a flatten, trying not to distort it too much. So I've got a nice little 6.5 by 12.5 inch ruler here, and it's got a 45-degree line there and there, so that's a right angle. I'm going to put it on top of the 4 patch so that it's fairly squared up. It's not going to be 500% accurate. I'm going to hold on tight, and I'm going to trim off this raggedy stuff that's sticking out across the edge. Then I'm going to flip the block round. I'm going to choose one of the straight lines on the ruler somewhere. Get this right angle to fit in the 4 patch, and you can see I'm just trimming a quarter. There's the point that the 4 patch lines up, and I'm going to trim off 1/4 inch from that point. So I'm trimming away the raggedy stuff 1/4 inch away from the corner of the 4 patch, like that. Okay, I'll put the safety blade on, and there we are. That's the first block unit. That's the first unit. Are you filming? Mm-hmm. Okay, so here's my pile of rectangles, here's my pile of squares, and they've all got this diagonal line drawn across the back. Right sides together, the diagonal line is going to be that way and that way. I was going to say north to something, but anyway, it doesn't matter. So the next thing to do is to sew down the diagonal line, the pencil line that we've drawn on the back of the squares. Sharp-eyed observers may notice that I had a brain malfunction and I sewed down this edge and then had to undo it. So it's the diagonal line that we're looking for. So I'm going to sew right on top of it. Slowly, I don't want to stretch anything. Just point to point, right into the bottom corner. And then I'm going to grab the next one and carry on until I've done all 8. And here's number 8 of the set. Just going to go right down that diagonal line again, hoping to keep fairly on it, to the bottom corner, onto my scrap. Then I'll snip them all apart. Okay, this is not the only way of making flying geese, but it's a nice, basic, easy way. So note where the stitch line is. See where your 1/4 inch line is on a cutting ruler. There we go. So I've got the 1/4 inch line right on top of the stitch line. Holding it firmly with my hand, I'm going to cut away. So there will be 2 scrap triangles coming off, and that's what I'm left with. So I need to do the rest of the set. All right, so that's what we ended up with. So I'm just going to push that pink triangle out and squash the seams down, trying not to stretch it. So I can finger press it, and finger pressing's fine, or I can take it over onto my pressing mat. So I'm going to just do that with all 8 of them. Okay, I have got 8 rectangles which are now patterned with a pink corner, like that. So I'm going to have to get the other sides sewn on. So this time they go right sides together with the diagonal going the other way, like that. But to make it easier to sew, I'm actually just going to turn them upside down and put them on like that. Don't worry if it's a little bit wonky, it is fabric after all. There we go, slowly going down, point to point, all the way down. Okay, so I now have 8 pieces that look like this. This rectangle has got a square attached, and I'm going to cut off that part, and then when that flips over and gets pressed out, it will be a flying goose. It's not going to be easy to cut it until I turn it round like this. There's the stitch line. Put the 1/4 inch line of the ruler on top of the stitch line. Hold firmly onto the ruler and cut that off. You'll have 2 scrap triangles that you can either make something or toss. So it's now going to look like this. I'll press out gently without trying not to stretch that bias, and I'll toss it onto the ironing mat. Okay, this flying goose has too much goose, I suppose you could say. So like we did with the square in a square earlier on, I'm going to get this right angle lines on the ruler to just sit there like that. And I'm going to trim away the excess. So there's a 1/4 inch just beyond the point of the triangle, and I'm going to cut off all that other extra stuff so that there will now be a 1/4 inch from that triangle's point. Okay, I'm going to sew the flying geese together in twos. So they're both facing that way. They're going to be sewn together right sides together. So I'm going to put that one on top of this one. But after I've done that, I'm going to turn the whole unit over so I can see the crossover of the stitching on that one. Now, I'm not using pins or clips. I could, but because I've got a nice flat sewing table, I should get away with it. So the top edge is lined up and the side is lined up at the moment. Start off slowly. Now, once I've done a few stitches, I can just pull it all into shape so that the side lines up nicely, the bottom lines up nicely. And I can use my awl to hold it in the middle. And I'm aiming my needle to go right over that cross. And then I'm going to do the next pair exactly the same. Righty-ho, so we've got the little 4 patch and it's going to have geese attached to opposite sides. You want to make sure the geese are flying out that way. I have made the mistake of mixing and matching them, but I want them going out the way. So just like we did before, I'm going to flip this back on itself, so right sides together, kind of line them up. But I want to be able to see where that little crossover is, so I have flipped it upside down. I'm going to sew right down that edge, hoping that nothing's got too distorted along the way when it got pressed. Right, so I've just started off down this edge, I'm holding the bottom corner with my finger and just steering it slowly over that crossover of thread. Okay, so that side got sewn on, I turned it round like that. This opposite side is going to go on, so right sides together, make sure the geese are going the right way. Flip it over so that you will be able to see that crossover of thread. It's a little bit scant, but we'll make it work. So these are the other geese now. I'm making sure that they're going in the right direction. So I've got them coming down facing me. The right angle of the triangle to be lined up along the top. But as you can see, there will be an overlap down here. That's okay, we'll deal with it later. So this triangle is flipping over here, like that. And it's probably a good idea if I turn the whole thing over so I can sort of see some of the seams. I could press this down the other way so that I could be absolutely accurate. But let's see what happens. Okay, so going right down the edge, a bit stretchy at that end. Okay. Make sure that the bottom corner is all lined up. Hopefully, if I'm accurate, might need a little help over that seam. Right down there onto a scrap and snip and snip. Here's the other triangle going on here, so right sides together, but I think I will then turn the whole thing over so I can see the pieced part at least. There we go. I've lined up the top corner, the edge. I'm going to go with my... Okay, this is the other pair of geese getting attached to the triangles exactly the same way as the one I did before. Okay, Okay, so what you can see that I have now are 3 units, 3 parts of a block. It looks like it must be a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It's an octagon at the moment. Excuse the woofing under the table. Right, so we want some seams to butt up against each other. So the middle section, I'm going to have the seams facing in the way, and I shall finger press them and then flatten them with the iron. The seams at these other units, I want them going out the way so that when they meet and they get sewn together, one will be going in and one will be going out, and it will be flat. Well, hopefully anyway. Okay, so this has all got to line up nicely. Now, of course, you can use pins or clips if you want to, but what I want to make sure is that this meets here. That's the important thing. There will be overhang of these triangles at either end. I don't care about them at the moment. So I'm having it like this. So I could grab a couple of clips just to be sure. This triangle is sticking out well past here, that's fine. I'm just going to stitch down it gently. Don't want it to get distorted, it's bias, quite stretchy. Now, what I'm really looking for is, will this meet here nicely? Well, it will, hopefully. Keep it as straight as you can. There are the odd, well, there is the odd lump that you might just get a tiny tug from the back to get past. Not a forceful tug. Right, we want to cross over the stitching as near as possible. There we go, got past that one. I'll just unclip that. It's very stretchy, so if I need to just give it a tweak into position, I can. Okay, this is a new day because halfway through the last little attachment that was going on, the camera died. So here is the third section of the block, the opposite side of the octagon. So I'm just going to make sure that the geese are going that way, flip it over, line up that seam with that seam. It should butt up nicely. I can clip it if I want to, just to hold it in place. But as I mentioned before, it is quite stretchy. So while we're sewing it, we can just give it the odd little pull to make sure it's flat. So over to the sewing machine. Righty-ho, so the ear of this triangle is poking out beyond the edge of there, but the edge is lined up all the way with the underneath block. So we'll start off slowly using the tailor's awl tool to just help steer it like an extra hand. There we go. I'm going to go right down the edge. There will be a lump under here, so I may have to just give it a little tug as I get to it. There we go. And I'm going to unclip this as I come towards where the two seams are going to meet, and I'm just going to flip it over and check that it's going to nestle up nicely. A little bit of a ruffle, but if I use my tailor's awl to pull it into position, all will be well. Now there's going to be a bit of a lump here. I want to cross over. It's very difficult to see, but there's a little crossover of stitching. I want to just go right over it. Now I can see that it's going to be a bit bulky, so I'll just give it a bit of assistance. There we go, I'm over it. A little bit faster to the other seam. Unclip and have a little check. Just check that it's going to butt together nicely. Slow down. I want to cross where those stitch lines meet. If I have to give it a little a tug at the back. I don't mean much of a tug, I just mean there, just a couple of stitches. And now all I have to do is make sure that the edge of this lines up with the edge of the block underneath without stretching it over too much, because it is on the bias and it's stretchy. There's a seam underneath, so I'm just going to give it a little assistance. A couple of stitches right to the edge and right off the triangle ear onto my thread catcher. Righto, so we now have what looks like a scruffy octagon. I haven't pressed any seams yet. They match fairly neatly enough in my opinion. It's a little bit rumply, but that should flatten down. I'm only using my travel iron, but when the whole block's finished, before it gets pieced into the quilt, we could give it a good dose of steam to flatten it down. So I'm just going to put it onto the pressing mat and press those seams down flat, trying not to stretch anything, because of course, as I've kept saying, it is on the bias. So there we go. Now you have to ignore these ears that are sticking out. Everything will be tidied up at the end. So we've got 4 remaining triangles to attach, and it will magically then look like a square again. They're going to be attached onto the flying geese units, but what you need to do is fold them over absolutely in half and give that a bit of a finger press. If you can't see it very well, you can just put a pencil or pen mark on the back, and then I'm going to flip it onto here, and the crease should line up exactly with the point of the goose underneath, like that. Probably will need pins or clips at this point. The straight edge is going to line up with the straight edge of the geese, and the ears are going to stick out well beyond. Right, here we are at the sewing machine. The little crease I made is clipped so that it fits right on the end point of that goose underneath. So I'll just put that back. I'm going to flip the whole thing over so that when I'm sewing I have a better view, like this. So you will see that there are corners poking out in all directions. That's fine. I'm just going to be starting at the point of that one that's poking out. Very stretchy and biasy, so watch out. And I'm going to go straight across here, keeping my foot in line with the very edge of the flying goose. And I'm coming up to this join point here, and I want the needle to just skim this cross here. So keep going. Aim for it. It's going a little bit wonky, so I'll use my tailor's awl to make sure it all lines up still. I'm going to go all the way off this triangle onto my thread catcher, and I shall do exactly the same thing with the other remaining triangles that will attach to the rest of the goose units. Right, we're just about there. It's quite a scruffy looking block, I have to admit, but it is going to get a tidy up. There's a good reason why you find so many 1930s style quilts on eBay unfinished. It's because they do tend to have a little bit of fullness. So the answer is to use a nice puffy wadding. And if it's something that you don't feel that you can quilt yourself, jolly good idea to use a very friendly long armour to sort it out. So I'm just going to press those flat with my fingers, then I'll give it a little bit of a press with the iron so it's flat, and then we'll give it a tidy up. Oops. Right, so I've given it a bit of a tidy. The points are pretty good. There is one that's a little bit off, but I'm not entering a show. It's a bed quilt, so I can put up with it. The answer is just not to tell people where things weren't quite straight, and then they'll never know. So I'm going to take a long ruler this time, and I'm going to line up the 1/4 inch line, which on this ruler happens to be white. I'm going to line it up right on the pointy bits there, the pointy pink parts on this particular block. So the 1/4 inch line of the ruler is just on the edge of that pink triangle there, and also on that one. Okay, and then I'm going to make sure that I'm holding onto the ruler firmly, get my rotary cutter and slice all this excess off carefully. There we go. And I'm going to turn it round. Look how beautifully straight that is. Turn it round. I'm going to try and find a straight line along the bottom. Straightish line anyway. 1/4 inch mark right on that pink pointy part. And I might have to just push it over a little bit to make sure the 1/4 inch mark is by that pink pointy part. Pretty good, I'd say. As long as you're consistent throughout with all the blocks, they should fit together nicely. Spin it round again, and we'll do the other 2 sides. That's our block finished. You'll need 20 of them if you're going to make a single sized quilt that's generous enough for it to hang over the edges. It's pretty accurate. I have to say it would have been neater if I hadn't been talking and filming at the same time. But hey, accuracy's not quite everything. It's a fun block.